So once you're happy with that little blended section, you can drop your board out, pick up your foil, and notice how like that foil still sticks to the hair because it's so well saturated. So if you can't drop the foil and kind of let your tension off, it probably means you haven't got enough pre-lightener on that section. You might need to go back in on it. So keep your foil and your lightener quite smooth so that you know you've got good saturation. Because you've created a blended section here, if you just flip this foil up, and there's a lot of pre-lightener down in this section, you'll disturb your blend. So pull the foil at the bottom and make sure that you're double folding on that long hair so that you never get that carryover bleed, because you basically just destroy the work that you did. And just pop them closed. I wouldn't be the neatest of foilers. I'm actually not trained in foil from the start. I only moved to foil for the purposes of balayage because it gives me a lot of flexibility that I can go and do large sections. I like the way that it's kind of adjustable as well. So if you're looking for really pretty, perfect foils, you won't get them off me, you'll just get nice hair. So again, we're just going to pretty much repeat that heading right up the head here. We just want to keep dipping out from all these blondes that are existing here. So if I jump in, weave them out real quick, and pick up the hair that I want to work with. So again, these sections are really chunky. I'll take that out. If you find there isn't too much work to do and there's a lot of existing lightness there, we'll just ignore that, we'll take it out. So I haven't even really weaved that out properly, I just excluded these blondes. I'm gonna fall right down to the bottom of this hair, push up, and if it's very much in your way, just go back into the middle of that teasing and shove it back in there. I think a lot of people are afraid of the tease because they either, like we said, can't get it out or are afraid also to hurt their client. You need to be chatting to her and ask her, is she okay? There's very few people who are actually that sensitive that they can't take a bit of back combing. I think it's a fear that stylists have. So you'll find that she's quite comfortable. You're not in pain, are you? No. Okay, so down to the middle of the board. So heavy paint and well saturated down here, and just cleaning your brush off. If you find your brush gets a little bit too sloppy, you have too much going on, go back and take a fresh one out. It's not worth working with a messy brush. So everything is a flicking motion as you come away here. Now, when I get really confident, I'll use the flat of my brush, but if you're working on skinny sections or you need a bit of detail, turn your brush so that you're working with this kind of side edge and work on narrow sections that way. If you do overlap into the back combing, just pull it off. It's going to take a while for that to develop, so if you catch it early, don't be panicking, just pull it off with your fingers. You'll be fine. So I'm pull the board out, work this up. If you find working with the board awkward or you don't need it, don't use it, that's fine. You may just need to use like your forearm to support the foil. You might find your blending is a little bit more difficult, but it's kind of up to you to adapt it to suit yourself. I just like the foil on the board for a bit of support because I can blend into it. And sometimes boards go missing and you just have to live with it, so learn how to do it both ways. So we're pretty much just going to repeat this up the head the whole way, and we're going to do a V section, a flat section, a V section, a flat section, and when we get to the crown here, we'll talk about how we're kind of going to treat this and how we're going to work into these forward sections as well. Okay? So we've just continued this pattern up the whole way, so everything has been a diagonal followed by a middle piece. So we're V, straight, and I'm going to carry this on right up until the top. The important thing I think to see, if I roll this out of the way a little bit, is how much of her brunette we've actually left behind, because the way that balayage is going these days is that dimension is key, and her own natural dark or the box dye is not necessarily the enemy in this look. We actually want it to break up our blondes and to make things pop and to create contrast. And especially given that we're trying to create more texture for Sarah's hair, the more colours we get in here, the better it's going to appear. So don't think you have to cover every piece of hair here. And also the fact that you can skim through these sections and leave quite a lot of hair out is actually a time saver. So if you pick up every piece of hair, you're going to be here all day. Where if you can actually leave that dimension and come back for it later on, because we are going to address this with a different technique, that's going to carry on your time. It's going to pick things up a little bit for you, but it's going to give you the most impact too. Okay. So another straight section here, V, 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 and then we'll stop at the top and we're going to switch into one of these forward sections instead. So we're coming up to the kind of final sections before the crown here. So normally I'll just work right the way up and I'll weave out as I go, but we are just going to keep being really respectful of these sections. So I'll pop one more in around here. As I get to the top, I might not go as chunky as I previously had. So I'll make sure that maybe we have a little bit more of a defined gap in between. So we'll tease up, and now that creates that much finer highlight. So there's no fear there of the chunky highlight. You have to do the chunky highlight if you're going to tease, because if you do a super fine highlight and we go teasing on it, there's nothing there to lighten at the end. You have a really fine section, so there's no point in taking something that's too skimpy. There's no benefit in the tease then, there's no blend, and the highlight's actually going to get lost in the hair, basically. So you get no impact. So for teasy lights, go chunky first, and you'll create a baby light effect as you go along. So saturate the middle, feather up. So we're flicking off all the time. If we touch a little bit of this tease, just rub it off. And you can sideways flick. I often get asked about V's, if you want to take V sections or applying a V motion. I don't really bother with it too much, but if I'm one of these middle sections, I might just run the edges up a little bit. But when I'm on these side panels, I just go diagonal the whole way, because those two diagonals meet and create a V in the middle anyway. So it's just another detail. Again, if you want to spend the time on it, you can do it. There's no wrong way to do it. It's just not something that I choose to do. My brain is elsewhere at that stage. So make sure that you're getting good saturation in on those ends, because the emphasis on this look is always going to be depth towards the top and lightness toward the end. So if you're skimming this hair and it's dark, if you miss out on that lift, you're going to have an issue where you have to actually tone away all of this just to create your gradient effect. So lift her up, go across. And the foils aren't pretty, but they're in. And I'll take you around to the front section and we'll go for our money piece there. When it comes to Sarah's face frame and her money piece, basically this little side fringe section has made the decision for me, because if I place that too low and I want to decide maybe I want to emphasize her eyes, I'll only have this much hair to work with. So it's in my interest and it's in her interest as the client to actually place this maybe a little bit higher on the day, knowing that it's probably going to grow out and hit this area maybe come her Christmas appointment. So she'll get a lot of time, a lot of longevity out of that. So that kind of makes our mind up. I'm going to lift all these sections. So Sarah has a nice amount of baby hair here, and it's basically hair that's on like a different growth cycle to the rest of the hair. So it tends to drop out and shed quite easily, and then it's kind of always at that level. If she was a blonde and I was doing a really impactful money piece there, I might decide to involve this in it, because I kind of don't want that gap and I don't want that dark there. But because we're doing a brunette approach here, it's actually going to work out okay to let these bits settle in between. So I don't mind excluding some of them from our section now. So anything that wants to come out, we're just going to let it and kind of choose to do less damage for those weaker kind of hairs. So I'm going to spin you a little bit to the front. So I'm going to take my first section and just skim right across the front. So my parting is in here, so I'm not wasting energy on putting highlights over here. I'm going to place this first one at an angle right where that parting is going to split. So drop it there. Pop her back. So sometimes this hair is so fine that you actually almost don't need to weave it. You might get away with just doing a slice right across this section. So by letting any of those small hairs drop out, I can suss this out and see what kind of a density we have. Can you tip your head down? Thank you. So actually, in fairness, she's quite a bit of hair there. There's a lot of short hairs inside it, but we'll use the whole thing. But what we're going to choose to do here is actually not run this right to the root. So in that case, actually using a thicker section won't be a problem. So back in with my board because I like it to blend on. So I'm just going to tuck my foil over the top, swap my hands. So just for supporting the board, I have a thumb on front and I'm holding it underneath there and my hand is going to slide down. So when I place that underneath her head, I'm going to catch with my thumb and I can adjust as I go along. So again, load your brush nice and heavy down here, stick it to the foil, and we can just feather up as far as here. And you're kind of being conscious that we have set a specific length on this section. So we know we're staying roughly kind of that inch to a half an inch off the root. And good saturation there. So since I haven't got too long a section, I don't really need to double fold here unless I just want to tuck the foil out of her way. So the next foil I'm going to place is going to be directly behind that. I'm not skimming or leaving a gap like we might do in a full head of highlights. I'm going to literally go right behind it. And because I want this one to be just that little bit stronger, I am going to take this as a slice. But if you look, in terms of a slice, it's a really, really fine section. So if we place that up against my skin, you can see like very, very transparent there. So really that's going to blend out quite easily as well. I'm kind of not afraid of any slicing as long as it's not chunky. And I'm not afraid of any weaves if it is chunky, but I'm teasing it out or I'm blending or feathering. So again, load in the middle and brush up. And it's kind of okay if you stagger the lengths that these sections reach. So if the previous one goes a bit high and this one comes a bit low, all of that is going to add in to your blend later on. Because we kind of are trying to do the opposite of line work here. So depending on how strong you want this section, you might choose to do another slice in here and then move your way through into weaves, and we're going to probably finish it out with a couple of teasy lights. So because I'm trying to give lots of impact, I'll do one more slice here. This one is actually a little bit denser, a little bit thicker, but I'm going to blend it out a little bit lower there to compensate. So if I pop my board under, I'm just going to pinch out those blondes. I don't want to play with them today. So, pop my board in, pressing down with my thumb, and that tension is up against her head, and she's still not in pain, so we're good. Paint low here to use up all the product that's on your brush. If you start here, you will end up blending into the new root, and it gives you no space to go anywhere with your blend. So set yourself up that you have lots of room to go further up when you need to. This is where I probably will turn sideways because I don't have any back combing or anything to kind of buffer this out. So I have to be quite precise and particular with my brush. So I'm using the side. I'm not doing it too fast because I just want to be a little bit neat, but I'm actually just doing individual strokes there. And that too is going to stagger the blend. So we can see that. And I'll pop my foil or my board out. And then I can reload my brush, head back in and saturate those ends. Just being aware that as you move up to thicker sections, your saturation has to be so good because you're going to struggle to lift a thicker section more than you will a fine section.